Hello, I'm Andre Aciman, and I'm here to ask you to kindly subscribe to Books on Toast channel. Otherwise, I will come and haunt you in your deepest dreams, and I will never let go.
Hello, and here's another special episode of Books on Toast, and we are joined here today by Andre Aciman. And Andre Aciman is like a very popular author whose books have been transformational for many of us. You would know him by his very popular book called Call Me By Your Name, and that has really like broken many records. So I'm so glad to be talking to you today. So
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Is this how's the India experience been so far for you? Have you been traveling a lot?
I arrived in Mumbai a few days ago, then I went to Calcutta, there was a festival there, and I'm here in Jaipur.
Okay.
And how is India? It's fantastic.
I have to be traveling more around India.
I'm going back to Mumbai for a few days.
Okay.
Then I have to go back to my office because I also teach full time. So I have to do that, and I will have no time to recover from jet lag.
Yes.
But then I don't experience jet lag anymore.
Okay. Oh, you've been like you're.
No,
over
I'm
it
wasted.
now.
I'm still in 2016 jet lag. So
The jet lag continues.
it continues. I don't know what time it is. So
I'm glad. You're perfectly functional, and you're still like writing amazing novels that are breaking our hearts. So it's working for us.
I hope
Must
so.
be
I
really
hope so.
terrible for you, but it's great for us.
I'm going to die soon. It doesn't matter.
Okay. So my first question to you really has to be about Call Me By Your Name.
Sure.
And it's a book and also a movie adaptation that has been repeatedly watched and read by its ardent fans.
Yes.
Like it's constantly on a rinse cycle. It's like really like cleansing people's hearts and souls by the number of times that they've immersed themselves in an experience. What does it mean for an author to have created a work that has been loved by so many people in so many mediums, and they watch it over and over again?
Well, if you're like me, it doesn't register. It doesn't register. In other words, it's not that it doesn't make a difference, but it doesn't access a part of my soul or my mind that has changed, that will change because of this. I'm happy that people like my book. I would have been miserable if they hadn't liked my book. But the happiness that I feel is mitigated because I'm always worried about the next project, the next book, the next whatever it is that I'm involved in. And that's where all my mental and emotional energy goes. What has happened in the past is nice, but I have to move on. And so I don't get any kind of pride or gratification or self-aggrandizement that people feel sometimes because they've accomplished something. I said, I've written a book, it's very nice, I move on.
Wow, that's an amazing clinical way to like sort of deal with things that have happened in the past. You just
Well, it's a
try
way.
to move on.
It's a way of also protecting yourself from failure in the future. If you don't care very much for success in the past, failure in the future may not hurt that much, but you never know.
Does failure tend to hurt?
Rejection hurts. Rejection always hurts because it reminds us that whoever we thought we were was smaller than we actually are.
Words of wisdom.
What?
The words of wisdom.
But isn't it true that rejection is a very... On the other hand, when I was younger and I would sort of try to make a pass at a woman and she would say, no, I'm not interested. Okay, fine, I'll go to the next one. It didn't matter that much. But rejection, especially in the writing world, can be devastating.
And I'm sure you have to deal with a lot of, rejection tales of your students because you're also a teacher of creative writing.
Yes. I teach them one thing. I teach them, I've submitted my work to many magazines, and sometimes they turn you down. Well, you have two ways of saying A, they're stupid because they turned you down, or B, it didn't work for them. It doesn't mean that you're a bad writer. It means you can sell it to somebody else, and usually you can. And to a better person. So the person who rejected you may not have been worthy of you.
That is true.
And I tell my students that, and it's true for me too. When you are rejected, most of the time you're disappointed.
Yeah.
But then you just get over it and you move on.
What are you working on right now? Your next project?
I have a book of essays that's coming out very shortly.
Okay.
And I have, of course, what you guys call the sequel, which is not a sequel. It's not a prequel. I like to call it in-betweequel. It's between a sequel and a prequel.
Of Call Me By Your Name?
Of
That's
Call
the
Me By
sequel.
Your Name, yes.
Okay, wow. And both of them are scheduled to be out later
No, one
this
is coming out at the winter of this year.
The essays.
The essays is coming out, yeah, and the prequel, we haven't submitted it officially yet, so we're waiting.
I'm a big fan of Out of Egypt and your letters. So it's both these books have meant like a great deal for me when I was reading them, because they spoke to me a lot about remembrance and memory and displacement. And you also teach Proust
Yes.
in the university, and he also talks a lot about memory and remembrance. So really, like, has Proust been elemental and just a friend that you've held on to? His works have meant something to you? And do you think he continues to be relevant to younger kids who are now learning today?
Well, to answer your second question first, sometimes I teach on a volunteer basis in a high school, and they say, what do you want to teach? Hemingway, Salinger? I said, no, these are disgusting writers. I will not teach these writers. I will teach Proust. And they said, no, Proust is too difficult for young people. I said, no, it's not. And I begin to teach Proust, and they adore it, because Proust is writing about his own adolescence. And I teach to high school students Proust, who is an adolescent and is writing to them, and they understand it totally. And they write brilliantly about Proust when they are 16, 17. So he's not irrelevant to today's youth. Today's youth, however, has no patience to read a work that has more than 2 tweets to it. Okay, and one of my sons has written a book called Twitterature.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, and so it's a book that is about tweets, tweets from the great writers, as if the great writers were writing tweets. Anyway, but I'm moving on. But Proust has meant a lot to me because he changed my perception of what literature was.
How so?
He taught me a couple of things. One is that rhythm in style is extremely important. Not poetry rhythm, but the rhythm of an idea that is basically stepping ahead and ahead, and then taking tangents and tangents on tangents on tangents, and then coming back to where it was headed, suddenly to reveal something, because there always has to be an epiphany and a revelation at the very end of something that the reader has always known and suspected, but has never thought about carefully enough or considered about himself. Forget about the story. So the way I like to say it is that writing in Proust is an exercise in being reintroduced to yourself.
Wow.
And when you're being told whoever you thought you were was not exactly you. You are basically what the writer is telling you you are, which may be a fiction, but it's a very functional fiction.
Wow. So did you read a lot of Proust while growing up? How
Yes,
did you discover Proust?
I discovered Proust from my father, because my father told me you should buy Proust, and he bought me the first volume.
Really?
He didn't buy me the first volume, he bought me the second volume.
Okay. And that's how
I started reading. And then I said, I was 14 at the time, and I said, this is too close home. It's way too close, and I didn't want to go on. But then I read Proust when I was in my late teens, and I said, I can understand. After you read Dostoyevsky, Stendhal, Flaubert, and all the other great writers, you suddenly realize, oh my God, this guy's a genius. You can't write any better than this. And so I realized that this was important for me, and it was important for me for another reason, because he was the only author I knew who ever mentioned memory. And for me, memory was very important, particularly since I had lost a place in the world that I still remembered very vividly and did not want to forget.
Which place is that?
That was Alexandria, the city of my birth. And therefore, I wanted to remember it, and I wanted to remember it not only in my head, but on paper. And so I always knew that at some point in my life, I was going to remember it on paper. And I think that for about 25 years, I was taking mental notes of all those moments that were so important for me as a child in Alexandria. so that when I started writing Out of Egypt, I was spilling everything on paper very fast.
Is that a constant struggle for a lot of young authors that you see today, like contemporary authors? The fact that the struggle to retain identity, to retain a space within your works, the fact that life has become so fast paced, people are reading lesser, or that is the assumption. To really immerse oneself in like a space and a city and to retain it and to then translate it, is that a challenge you think that young authors face today?
No.
No.
I don't think so. I don't think that that's the challenge that they feel. The challenge is that what they feel is that they need to reify, to articulate an identity which they think is the approved identity. And so everybody's doing what is approved. And I find there's something very simple and facile in what they're trying to do. The attempt to capture something that is evanescent, difficult, tentative, provisional, is always very difficult and challenging, and they don't want it. They want something that's here and now, easy, fastly said, quickly, and publishable.
Yeah, that seems like fast-moving fiction.
It is fast. It's not people don't want to slow things down. To understand exactly, they loved their parents, but there was also a problem with their parents, and their parents didn't even like each other. And how do I explain this in a way that makes sense to people? And so the relationship with the parents has to find a simplified version, which is not the version that you lived with.
Yeah.
And therefore it's an artificially arrived at mix of things that makes sense on paper, but it's only on paper, just on paper.
Just on paper.
Just on paper.
One thing I wanted to speak to you about was your real, expression of intimacy in Call Me by Your Name. You also said in an interview that it's easier to write about young intimacy and young love and lust than it is about middle-aged love and lust. What is it about that kind of love which is harder to put down on paper?
First of all, when a young person who is 17, or in my case, as I wrote in another book, 12, writes that he wants to be hugged by someone who is sweating, because he wanted to be hugged by somebody who was sweating, and wanted the sweat on his skin, without knowing a thing about sex. So there was nothing sexual. I mean, in his head there was nothing sexual. In ours there's plenty sexual. But he is... for a kid to say that is powerful, and it's acceptable. Imagine if a narrator who's 60 years old says he wants to embrace somebody's sweat. It becomes disgusting. It becomes offensive. And so the libido of a kid is accepted, whatever form it takes. The libido of an older person needs to be camouflaged or mitigated or reduced somehow so that it doesn't hit you as offensively. When we see young kids having sex in a film, that's perfectly okay. But can you imagine two 80-year-old people having sex together? You don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's exactly what I'm talking about. So it is very hard to write about a middle-aged person, say 35, 40, 45, having a desire for someone, and he needs to sort of watch his step, because it could become tasteless or embarrassing or awkward if it goes beyond a particular fringe. So it's more difficult to do.
That's true, absolutely true. Everything, and also I think pop culture perpetuates
of course.
youth that much more, and that's a little bit of a problem because we do get older.
Well, imagine if you have very, very fat people in love with each other. You never see that. Or how about two, what do you call them, Down syndrome children being in love with each other? Do we want to see that? No, we don't. No. We accept it, but we don't want to watch them. There's something that needs to be, so you have to work harder to translate that into prose or into film, if you're going to do it, in such a way that it becomes acceptable and not challenging.
Okay, I just wanted to go back in time a little bit and talk about your reading habits when you were growing up. What kind of fodder did you grow up on?
Well, you should know that when I arrived in Italy, I was 14 years old, and suddenly my family had lost all its wealth and everything, and so we were suddenly very poor. And I didn't like Italy at all. I hated Italy because I considered it very backward to compare to Alexandria, which was far more progressive and far more advanced than this Italy that I met in Rome also. I was in Rome, but it was a very backward place. And so I would go into my room, and I think I said that today, did I?
Yes, you did.
And I would read only the classics as a way of avoiding contact with the rest of the world, because there was no place for me in the world. And why did I read the classics? It's because everything about them meant that they were timeless. They existed. They were going to exist regardless of what I did. Whereas everything about my life was so transitory and transient and provisional. So I just couldn't commit to anything. I was in Italy, but I wasn't going to live in Italy. I wanted to be in America, but I was not in America. I had lost Egypt, where I didn't belong, but I wanted to go back to.
Yeah.
I mean, so everything was sort of unhinged.
Yeah.
Everywhere I looked was unhinged.
Dislocated.
And then the classics were perpetual. They were established. They grounded me.
And can you name some of them?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I read every week. Every week was a different book, and so I read all of Dostoyevsky. I read Fielding, almost all of Fielding. Why did I read Fielding? I don't know, but I read Fielding. I read Jane Austen, and
Really?
I love Jane Austen. I teach Jane Austen all the time.
Wow.
And who else did I read? I loved Katherine Mansfield, Joseph Conrad, all these people. I mean, I read them all, and these are just there was the Russians. I read all the Russians. And of course there was French literature, which I think is greater and far more powerful than English literature, though I write in English. Okay, so all the great French writers I read, and I love them all.
So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure having you on the channel. We are so excited. All our viewers love your books and they constantly talk to us about it. So we are very happy.
Thank you.
Get your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for watching. Do like this video, share and subscribe to the channel, and do tell us in the comment section what you thought about this video. Tell us what you like about Andre Aciman's works, and we can have a conversation with you there.